Hey, Joey, it's always a pleasure to have you on Grande Rock. Congrats on the new album, Punching the Sky.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
I know you had from what I understand, you've been on Grande Rock before. So what's happened the past 5 years between the new album and the previous? What was the space between them?
We did a lot of touring dates. Believe it or not, we've probably done more touring dates for the Win Hands Down album cycle than maybe any other cycle we've ever done, to be honest with you. It's pretty bizarre to say that, uh, knowing we've been around for, 40 years or whatever it is. Um, but it's actually true. We kept getting offers. We just did a bunch of touring that involved a lot of different things, a lot of different festivals and tours. Did a couple of tours with Queensryche, a couple of tours at Metal Church. We did a run with Saxon. We all did a lot of different things, and festivals here and there fit in. We did the Symbol of Salvation in its entirety tours. We did, one in the U.S. and one in Europe. So a lot of tour dates was happening during that time. And I think you're alluding to, everyone is always curious why we put records out every 5 years. And
Right.
we kind of been on that trend for a while. And it's not really, believe it or not, it isn't really mapped out that way. It's super ironic that it just happens to be every 5 years. It's weird. But the last three records have been 5 years apart. And so this time, we began writing. We came off the Queensryche tour sometime in 2017 in the fall, I believe. I could be wrong about that, but I think it was sometime around there. And I started writing. I just started writing for no real particular reason. It wasn't like we sat down and said, "Okay, now it's time to make a record." It was just more like, I don't know, some inspiration came or something. But that was December of 2017, and so I wrote a couple of things. I always write a few things before I send them to John. It's kind of the way it works. And so by the time middle of January came around, or late January of 18, I probably had written two or three songs. And so that was really the sort of the starting off, the jumping off point. And then from there, we didn't finish writing until October of 2019. So, we that's pretty normal for us to take, like, 14 to, 20 months or something to write. That seems to have been what we normally do every time. The last three records took about that long to write. So this one is pretty much in the same ballpark. Um, and then there you have it. Before you know it, it's 5 years, and the record comes out in 2020, and it just works out that way.
Well, it's an amazing album too. I've listened to it a few times, and
Thank
God,
you.
yeah, I totally dig the new album.
Cool.
Did anything change on the approach for writing this album this time?
No, not really. I've said this before, but John and I don't. John and I do most of the songwriting, or the kind of the music, direct the music in the way that it ends up going. But we don't ever really have a plan. We don't really sit down and say, okay, let's write this. Let's go in this direction, or let's go in that direction, or let's do this time different than we did this last time. We don't ever really have those conversations. The only things that were really kind of a conscious thing was that I was experimenting with trying to make, uh, our ultimate agenda, or goal, is to just write really great songs that have huge. They just feel uplifting, and they feel epic, and big and gigantic, and how do we do this kind of thing. And I think on the last record, on Win Hands Down, some of the songs ended up being a little on the long side in length. And so I think the only thing that was a little different this time was that I was consciously trying to see if I could still attain this kind of grandiose, big, epic feeling, but doing it in a shorter time frame and with a shorter song. Could I still achieve that feeling without using up, 7 minutes every time? Can I do it in 5 minutes? 4 and 3/4 minutes or whatever. I'm not counting numbers, but I'm thinking to myself, can I do this with in a smaller package? And that meant going back to trying to approach things with a little more simplicity in terms of the actual arrangements of the songs. So for me, that was a challenge to try to attempt to do that. And that's really the only thing that was any real different. The other things that I think ended up being different. It wasn't really sort of plotted out this way, but I think that this record ended up being a little more diverse. I think in the songs, between each song, the diversity in the record is a little wider than Win Hands Down, but that wasn't really done by a conscious effort. It was kind of more just once the snowball started going down the hill, John and I allowed ourselves to let that happen and to bring in different influences, maybe, and different sounds and different things that made it sound kind of diverse. But those are really the only kind of differences that I think came into play this time.
Speaking of diversity, you use so many different international instruments. What was the idea behind that, and who brought up that process?
Well, we're the band. It's in a general, all of us, all five guys, we listen to a lot of different kinds of music. We always have, even growing up as kids. We've always embraced the fact that we enjoy and listen to, and even are inspired by lots of different kinds of music. So we've always approached our band with this kind of open mind. And so along the way, in the beginning, you hear less of that because and the first three records are a little more heavy on the more what at that time current influences, which was the new wave of British heavy metal for the most part, and then a little bit of Judas Priest and Scorpions, and the little later later Sabbath, those influences were there. But the older we got, and the more we were exercising our songwriting skills, the more we started to let more influences come in from all kinds of different areas. And as far as the world music, the ethnic sounds and stuff, I mean, I think the first time we really super embraced that was when we did Symbol of Salvation on the song Tribal Dance. And the whole intro with these ethnic drums was performed by a friend of ours from the neighborhood we grew up. Well, that was done intentionally, and that was because we wanted to employ, feeling of being in a certain area. And so, how else do you do that but by bringing in instruments of a particular area? So we feel like that was our first time that we brought that in, and we have no problem doing that. And I try to do it as much as possible because I just love the sense that it takes you out of, it takes an expectation out of you as a listener, and it's sort of surprising, and it also helps you set a mood into a particular frame of mind. When you hear bagpipes, you immediately take, unless you're from Ireland or Scotland or the UK, it takes you out of where your world is and it takes you right to that area. I've always loved those things, and I do it as much as possible without overdoing it. I don't feel like it's. I think there's a time and a place for it. We have some also. Well, we use some pipes in the beginning of Standing on the Shoulders of Giants, and then there's some other kind of Middle Eastern instruments that we used in Never You Fret in the beginning and in the riff parts, and it's because the music itself is written in a scale that makes it's reminiscent of music that's from the area, from the general Middle East area. So of course, let's add some ethnic instruments from the area, and it helps you focus, and it helps you get into that frame of mind.
Sure, it almost has like a gypsy minor to it, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. When I heard that the first time, I'm like, wow, you don't hear that too often, I think the one was Holy Wars by Megadeth. I think they had a little bit of that in there.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah,
we're certainly not, we're not making no attempts to reinvent the wheel here. I mean, it's certainly this use of instruments has been done before, but And like I said, we try not to overdo it. But I think when it's appropriate, I think that it works well for us.
What does the album title "Punch in the Sky" declare?
Well, we it doesn't. We're not really setting out to make any kind of declaration necessarily. It's just the purpose of it kind of came in a roundabout way. Really out of pragmatism, being pragmatic about trying to find an album title, and we were going to call it "Standing on the Shoulders of Giants" originally, but we didn't want to repeat ourselves in the way of using the first track on side one as your album title, because we did that on When Hands Down. We did it on March of the Saint. Symbol of Salvation is a song title. So Raising Fear, first song, side one. We've done it so many times. So we wanted to challenge ourselves and try something different, and use a line from a lyric, maybe that kind of summed something up. We couldn't really find one, but then this line from Standing on the Shoulders of Giants just kept sticking with me, punching the sky. The line is punching the sky every day, but I just thought punching the sky, like it has this, I don't know, it kind of conjures this, you can think of it literally, like raising your fist in the air, but that evokes so many different things for different people. What does it mean? It could mean victory, it could mean success, it could mean you could be doing it in anger, you could be doing it in revolt, and there's a lot of different ways you could take it. But when the album cover artwork was done and we got the title, and I was thinking about it more later, I personally came up with my own thing, which I don't know if represents everybody's in the band's view, but it began to take on a meaning about our band and about our plight, if you will, or what we've been trying to do all this time and what we still are attempting to do now. And that is really just to continue to evolve and grow, break through the barriers that we've had to face with genre, genre inclusion, or some of these barriers that maybe we've put on ourselves over the years. Punching the sky to me represents this, or represents that for us, the sky is not the limit. We want to punch the sky. We want to go past that limit. We want to become better songwriters, better musicians, better people, better father, better husband, better, brother. Just keep growing and evolving and going further than just what's over you and what's around you. So punching the sky to me has a representation of our band and our continual plight to just evolve and grow.
Well, and I love the versatility in the sense of, like you were saying, there's so many different interpretations. And I think a lot of bands fall pretty short of that when they come out with an album title.
Well, I mean, everyone has their own take and their own, what do you say? It's their own mantra, if you will. And some people, for some, it's way more important to be very specific about one thing, and that's fine. If that's what your stance is, you should stand up and say it, and that's what you do. And we've had some record titles that have suggested that. I mean, March of the Saint was, that's a call to arms, and for early heavy metal, like let's go, like we're conquering the lands, whatever,
Right.
whatever. As adolescent as that sounds, but we were only 19 when we made that, but still, so everybody has their own different taste and what they want to say. But over the years, I think we've kind of had this more, our intentions, especially with John and the way that he writes lyrics, is we've kind of been a little bit more of a vagueness. We don't really want to be on the soapbox. We don't want to tell people what they should think or how they should view things, or we don't really say to them, we stand for this, so you must follow us in this way. We come from this place where we still feel like music and being an artist has to have some form of entertainment to it. So we want to be able to take you away from the real world and take you somewhere else. It's not to mean that we can't be thought-provoking, because a lot of John's lyrics are thought-provoking, but it isn't from a place of like, this is what I think and this is what you should think. We don't really subscribe to that.
Sure. And you stated that the record has a reflection of where you are right now. Where exactly is that?
I'm in Los Angeles. No, I'm kidding.
Right, exactly.
It's from, I think I'm hoping that the music really is speaking for itself. And this is where we are as songwriters right now. Every record that we make is a representation, a snapshot in time of where we are at that moment. So as a result, every record is a little bit different than the one that's came out before it. And this is something that maybe kind of plagued us in the early days, but as it turns out, we've in the last several years, 10 years or so, we've began to embrace this sort of this evolution, if you will. And we feel like we are finally comfortable with being on our own island. And the whole time, that's all we really wanted to be anyway. We wanted to be on our own island. But and when you're young and you're coming up and stuff, especially when you're involved in a new genre that's being created, which is where we were at in 1982 and 83, we were getting swept up in this new genre, which was really not there before, Quiet Riot's Metal Health, or the new wave of British heavy metal. It was just wasn't there. So you have a tendency to want to be included in with the pack, and that's what we were doing. We were influenced by the new wave of British heavy metal, and we wanted to be in that pack. But then, fast forward a few years later, the pack started to splinter off. Thrash metal became a thing, and then the hair metal thing became a thing, and glam metal, and then power metal a little bit later, and then even a little further than that, death metal was born. And so you now you have all these places that you could fit into, these slots, and the press and the public eye sometimes need to put you in these places. And we found ourselves we didn't really belong into any one of them particularly 100%. We could hang and we could be fit into certain of those boxes, some of those boxes, but not one of those boxes alone. And so, we ended up having a little bit of an identity crisis, I think, at that point. Where do we fit in? How do we, with our record label and management started to scratch their heads. What do we do with these guys? They wanted us to be, the easy fallback is you need to be on the radio, so how do you get on the radio? You write commercial sounding songs. And we were like, yeah, but that's not really what we do, So sometimes that confusion can get to you. And I think that at some degree it did. So where we are now, to answer your question in a long-winded answer, is that we're in this place now where we feel like we're comfortable with being in our own skin. And it's employed this sense of freedom in us that I don't think we really felt like we had for some reason. And I don't know. I think that it's been reflective in the last three records and the type of music that we've been putting out and writing. And I think there's a certain honesty and a genuineness about it that I think people are really connecting with.
I just, going over the tracks, I love all these songs, and looking back on each song, can you give us a little hint about what each one meant to you?
Well, that's hard to answer because they're so close to me. But I mean, I can tell you peripherally. I mean, each thing that we write is sort of like an experiment, if you will, and it's an exercise. And what can I do? What can I do with this idea that came to me? And they all come from some place that I don't know where it is. Sometimes I get influenced by a movie I've watched, or a scene in a movie I watched, or something I felt, or something that's reminded me of something of my youth, or something that was nostalgic, or something was very new and modern that I've never heard before, and that inspired me. So all these things are nucleuses for each song, but I couldn't specifically really tell you what those were. But so I think the writing process began sometime around where I think the first thing that I wrote might have been oh god, it might have been actually a song that didn't make the record. and it was a very long song. It was like 7.5, 8 minutes or something, and it was this it had all these parts, and it was really long. And at first, I was excited about it, but then I don't know. We John and I came together, and we were putting lyrics down and wordless, all the vocal parts, and then suddenly the song felt long to me, and I think I was again this consciousness of trying to do the same thing with a shorter time frame was in my mind right away, and so we began chopping it up, um, and then it started to just feel really different, and I wasn't sure about it, so I just said put this on the back burner, and then I had a few other ideas that were just doodles that I started to play with. So I played it with these doodles. They weren't really formed yet, and then those songs were the ones that really got the ball rolling. And I think those were the song "Bark No Bite," um, "Standing on the Shoulders of Giants," and what's the other one? Maybe "Bubble." And one, I was in this place in my head where I was listening to a lot of Chicago, the band Chicago.
Oh
um,
wow.
yeah, and I was like, and I mean like the early Chicago, not the real poppy. If you hear me now, take away, not not the
Right.
real radio, not the radio stuff, but the early '70s stuff, which is super proggy and great arrangements, amazing just parts and musicianship and just killer stuff. And I was really obsessed with the way that they arranged songs and the use of the horn sections. And Missile the Gun was one of the songs that came out of that, as was Bark No Bite. So those two songs, oh, Missile to Gun was the other one in that batch, by the way. So Bark No Bite and Missile to Gun were probably the first two that I came up with and then finished writing at that time. So we're talking late December 17, early 2018, and it was during my still in this kind of Chicago mode, and it was really just an exercise in like playing with arrangements and keeping things, and again trying to keep things simple but being creative, trying to be creative at the same time, and not overthinking things too much, but trying to utilize um, the guitars in a sense of writing. My goal in those two songs was to write intros that reminded me of what a horn section might do. And so that's kind of where those songs were the jumping off point from. And then I got to Standing on the Shoulders of Giants, and I'm not really sure where that came from, but that was another one that it just was a long song. And at first, I thought it was, it was again, I just let it happen, and it was like a 7-minute song, and it was epic, and I thought it was great. And then I sent it to John, and he loved it, and he came back and he came up with this chorus, and it was like the perfect chorus for it. And I was like, that's just brilliant. It's amazing. And so we went through all these versions of this song, and I said to him, you know, I think it's too long, let's cut out. So I edited the song, and that song went through like, I don't know, at least 5 different versions. And in the
Wow.
end, it was much shorter. But at some point, John came back to me and he says, "You know, I'm I'm sorry, but I got so married to the very first version of this that I think we should go back to the first version." And I was like, I kind of rolled my eyes, and I'm like, "All right, I guess. Well, all right, we'll try it. I think that you're wrong, but let's go down that rabbit hole." So I pulled it back together, and I went back to the original arrangement, but I rewrote the middle section. I completely threw out what the music that was there originally, and I rewrote the breakdown section. And uh, once I rewrote the middle section, I said, "Oh, okay, now it works." It was just the middle section was just wrong, completely wrong. And so now it's flowing better, and now it's okay. So once I had done that, then that I accepted that, and it went back to being a 7-minute song. But I said, This one is working. This is it didn't need to stifle it anymore. It now it's working. It's fine." And I was wrong in thinking that the simple effects the simple fix was just to edit it. So and I admitted that to John and to myself, and that's the end result.
That,
So
that's
yeah,
awesome.
and then the other thing, every song has a little story, I guess. I mean, my jurisdiction is uh, certainly an influence from this more bluesy kind of hard rock swagger that we've kind of gone down before. Um, you know, the truth always hurts. Kind of has this thing about that, this bluesy rock swagger. Over the Edge kind of has the same kind of swagger. We've done it on La Raza. Also has this kind of I think it's the song "Chilled," blues also on that record. And it's we've made it like, again. I just stated 5 songs, and we've never downplayed our influence that we have from Aerosmith. And so my jurisdiction is another one of those songs that comes from our love of American bluesy hard rock, and Aerosmith would be at the top of that list. So and let's see what else. Unfair, the song that's kind of a moody, slow, dark song. That kind of came out of something that I was inspired by from a movie or something I saw, and it was really just one part, and well, actually ended up being just 2 parts that I came up with, and I said to myself, let's see if we can write a song with just 2 parts. Like, does this song have to have a bridge? Does it have to have a solo section? Does it really have to have a key change? Like, are those things necessary in every single thing I write? Let's see if we can make a song with just 2 parts. And it kind of took my cue from Radiohead in that sense. I saw this thing on, there's a show called Austin City Limits. That's a live show from Austin, Texas. And I saw there was a show, they recorded a Radiohead full concert. And it's amazing if you ever see it. But a lot of their music, I came to realize, was kind of based on 1 or 2 little riffs, and they just build and they build and they build, and they rearrange the 2 parts, and it's still the same music, but it somehow turns into this 7-minute thing, and it's amazing. And so I kind of took my cue from that, and I told John, I go, this kind of reminds me of like what Radiohead might do. So let's go down that rabbit hole and see if we can actually create something that only has 2 parts over and over and over again. And so we took it as a challenge, and the end result is Unfair. And it was a fun experiment to do. I think we were able to accomplish that. And it's got a really great, deep, personal lyric meaning for John in particular. The song is about loss, and a mutual friend of his daughter's, who she went to school with. Um, she was a teenage girl. She's 13. She had a younger brother, 8 years old, and they were both killed in a car accident last year. They were driving with their parents. They were in the back seat, and they were hit head on from a drunk driver driving the opposite direction. And the 2 kids were killed instantly, and the parents survived. So did the drunk driver, unfortunately. And it was a really sad story, because it was like 1 minute you're here, 1 minute you're gone, and the parents, their attitude, uh, coming out of it, of course it was the most devastating thing ever. They lost both of their children, but their outlook and the way that they handled themselves, I guess, was like really with utmost composure, and they viewed the whole thing with intellect, as well as emotional heartbreak. And it was a really inspiring thing for John to see. And so he wrote the song in honor of the 2 kids, and it's about loss and super deep connection for John. And it really fit. It literally happened, um, right when we were writing the song. So it was almost meant to be that this music that we were writing was what came at the right time for this expression that John had to get off his chest. So that song has a lot of meaning for everybody. Never You Fret was a riff that kind of came to me out of just I don't know, nostalgia, I think. And when I finished writing the riff and I looked back at it, I said to myself, this reminds me of something Dave Pritchard would write. And you know, the thing with Dave and is that he's always been on our minds. Like he's always with us in spirit. He was a big part of the formation of what our sound ended up being. And so we never want to lose that. You know, I think I always make an effort to include Dave somehow on every record that we make. And I always have one eye on our past and where we come from, and I have another eye in the future to move us forward. But I never forget about where we come from. And so this song, this riff, and the rest of the song, I said, I'm taking Dave on this because this reminds me of something Dave would write. So what would Dave do? You know, how would Dave approach this? Dave was much better guitar player than I was. I write everything on guitar, but I knew that I could channel him in some way enough to get this song out and be a homage to kind of it was kind of is a homage to Dave. So that's the
That's
I,
awesome.
yeah. So that ended up being Never Your Fret. So I mean, maybe I left a few songs out, but I don't want to bore your audience with the rest of it. But that's an insight at least into uh, at least the frame of mind of what's going on with each song.
No, that's great. A lot of the listeners would benefit on that also because they'd like to hear more or less the literal interpretation, I guess, with lack of a better term. But it's good to dive into the head of a musician and a creative such as yourself. Now, I know there's a few guest appearances, Patrick and Dizzy and Jacob. Can you give us a little hint about what was going on there?
Sure. Well, with Patrick DRC, I had written "Standing on the Shoulders of Giants," and I make a demo. Real quick, my process is that I make demos of every song that I write before I even send it to John. So before he hears it, I'm like a madman. I make these demos that are really elaborate. They have tons of tracks, and they sound like I program the drum machine to make it sound human. I mean, I play all the guitar parts, even mock leads, and I put everything down. It sounds like a finished record before he gets it, and I'm just kind of anal about that. I don't need to do that because a song is a song, but I just have fun doing that, and it helps me. It helps me envision what the end result, what I want it to be in the end. So that's the method. When I wrote "Standing on the Shoulders of Giants," I felt like it needed some kind of a intro, and so it felt very, I don't know why, but the song felt very epic and big and grandiose and open spaced. And then I started to think about giant big green rolling hills and trees, and then I felt like, oh, it feels like Europe. And then where in Europe, but oh, that it just feels now it feels like the United Kingdom somehow. Well, it's Armored Saint, of course it does. um
Right.
so and so I immediately went to the bagpipes. So I put down. I have a keyboard. I play keyboards a little bit too, and I found a patch that was originally it was the Scottish Highlands pipes, which most of us are familiar with. It's more commonly used. And I wrote this little bit before the song in the demo, and that was just part of the fabric. And that song lived in demo form for a year before we started recording. And when it came time to replace all the parts in the song, I didn't want to keep my little keyboard sample because I felt like, well, it sounds like a keyboard sample. Like I want someone to actually play bagpipes. That would be cooler. So, of course, you go to the internet. What else are you going to do? And I found Patrick and living in Los Angeles, as it turns out. And he came highly recommended. He's got a lot of great, a lot of great endorsers and stuff like that. And so I contacted him, and it turns out that he played not only Highland pipes, but he played these other types of pipes called the Ulian pipes. I think I'm pronouncing that right, which are actually from Ireland. And I heard them, and they sounded much more interesting to me, way more somber and sad and sort of less bright and sort of cheery than compared to the Highland pipes. And so I liked that part of it. I thought that it added a little more darkness to the intro. And so I contacted him and I said, "Hey, I would love to hear you play these Julian pipes on our record." And he was totally into it. And at first, he had sent me back what I had written. And I said, I love it, but it sounded so good that I wanted it to be longer. And I said, "Can you do another one, but make it longer, and 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 make it your own too? Like I want to, you can riff on what I wrote, but I want you to embellish it more and improvise a little more." So he sent me another thing, and that's what ended up on the record. So I thought he did a great job, and he was really gracious about putting in his own 2 cents, as it were. And he did a great job with that, and that just adds a whole new level of I don't know. It's like watching a movie to me, anyway. So he did a great job, and it's a great addition. And then Dizzy Reed plays with Guns N' Roses, and he's an LA musician who's been around. He's been in the band since I think the late '80s, early '90s. I think it was in the early '90s. It was on their second record, I think, is when he
Yeah, I think
joined.
so.
Yeah, but he knows who we are. He's been a fan of the band's forever, and I've had never met him before, but Jeff Duncan, our guitar player, has been playing with him on and off in his solo project called Hookers and Blow, and so they've been friends for a while. And when Dizzy got wind that we were going into the studio to make a new record, he called Jeff and he says, "Dude, you got to get me on the record. I don't care. I'll play for free. It doesn't matter. I just want to come and I want to be on the record." So
Nice.
Dizzy called Dizzy. Me and Dizzy got together, and I said, as it turns out, I had some keyboard parts that I had played, but I'm not a keyboard player per se. So I said it would be great to have you on. I mean, we'd be honored to have you on this record. And he was like, "No, I'm honored to be on your record." So he came down and we went over the parts, and he's just a total pro. Had totally has his shit together, and it was great. He just improvised and on the parts that I had showed him, and he just went off and did his thing, and he was done in like 30 minutes or something. So um, it was cool, really cool working with him. He's a great guy,
That's
and
awesome.
he brought another flavor to it too. That's wouldn't have been there otherwise. And then Jacob Ayala is the son of one of our close friends that we grew up with from our neighborhood, John Ayala, and we had this song "Do Wrong to None," and it had this kind of a snare drum intro. And while we were tracking the drums in December of 19, we were in the studio, and it just kind of occurred to me, wouldn't it be cool if we did the snare drums with marching snare drums instead of just the regular snare drum? And Gonzo said, "Yeah, that would be a cool idea." And I said, as it turns out, isn't John Ayala's son, Jacob, he's in a marching band there, and he's in high school, and he's in the marching band, and he's a drummer. So I think it'd be cool to have him come down to the studio, and he could help play these parts with us. So called him up and gave him the parts, and we ended up tracking it at my house in the end. But yeah, so his son came down, brought some marching snares, and him and Gonzo played together, and then Jacob played alone and did some other things, and he was stoked, because he's 17 years old and he gets to play on a major record release, and uh, you know, we've known him since he was a little baby, he's a little kid. So, and it was fun to have, our friend that we grew up with, there's a connection with us in the neighborhood, and we have a lot of association with the guys that we grew up with, and we're a tight knit circle of people, not of friends, and we all have families and different lives now, but we still try to stay in touch somehow a little bit here and there. And it was nice to have keep the family line in there. So that was cool. A cool addition.
Sure. Apart from Armored Saint, you have something new coming out with Fate's Warning, right?
Yeah, we have a new record coming out. I think it's early November, maybe November 9th, somewhere around there. I'm not exactly sure, but yeah, new record coming out, and it's it's a great record. It's a little bit different than the last one, but Fates Warning, uh, it also works in this way, the same thing that Saint does, in that every record is a little different than the one before it. And this record is another no exception to that. Has a little bit of a different feel, and I can't really put my finger on what it is exactly. It was mixed by Joe Barisi, which has something to do with it, because Joe's very much he's very much like a he's an amazing, just, you know, he's a rock producer engineer. He's not a guy that makes things, I don't know, it's not sterile. He's very much an organic guy. And so he brought that to this record, and it's cool. It's great. Jim and Ray wrote some great songs, some great melodies, great music. It's got, some great killer, crazy proggy parts, but a lot of the songs are much in the way that I was describing the Armored Saint songs, or the frame of mind. Is it's a lot of the songs are a little more to the point, and there's a lot more simplicity involved, I think, in some of the songs here. Um, and that appeals to me. I like, I like simplicity and simple songs, So that part of it really appealed to me. So it's cool. We're excited for the world to hear it.
What do you think of the virtual live shows right now?
Well, I think they're cool because we're doing one.
Well,
um,
yeah, exactly.
um, I mean, look, my ultimate. At first, I thought they were weird and lame and awkward and bizarre, but I at some point I had to swallow the pill and say, look, it's either this or nothing. So I since then have embraced it, and I've watched a few of them, and of course it's not the same thing. It's not supposed to be the same thing, and it isn't the same thing. And let's move on from that. So it's like, this is all you get right now. So I think that I'd rather take this than nothing. That's the embracement that we're all at right now, and that's the reason Armored Saint decided to end up doing one. So we're playing one on. We're the first airing is live streaming is on October the 10th, which is next Saturday.
Yeah.
And it runs for a full month. Ours does anyway. So you can watch it anytime from October 10th until November 8th. We are playing a full set, doing some old classics, pulling out a few old gems, deep cuts. Also, we're playing 4 brand new songs from Punching the Sky. We're also going to be doing a little Q&A at the end. We're having people submit questions at our website. And we'll take some time and answer some questions at the end. And we're looking forward to just doing our own thing, going on stage, rocking out like we normally do. Of course, it's going to be weird for us, and we'll take a few minutes to adjust to not having anybody in the audience. But
Oh,
we're looking forward to it, and we just want to celebrate the record release of Punching the Sky, and have some kind of connection with fans. This is the only way we can do this, so we're hoping people come and join us. If anybody's interested, it's only $10 US. You can use your conversions wherever you are in your country, but it's $10 to get in, to buy a ticket. If anybody's interested, the website is Armored Saint, that's one word, armoredsaint.veeps, that's veeps.com. And all you got to do is sign in and follow the link to tickets, $10. And we hope people can show up there and spend this day with us.
well, I know we're going to be there.
Cool.
We already signed in for that.
Great.
Um, well, I appreciate the time, and I look forward to many, many more years for Armored Saint.
Great. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
yeah, I've been
Thank you
following
for
you
the
guys
time.
for a long time.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for following for so long, and rolling
Sure.
with our